Good to see everyone here this morning at our April AIDS and Issues. We have a good program here for you again this morning. We're glad you're here. Wanted to just make a couple of announcements. First of all, I think I've met everybody in here, but if not, I'm Paul Fry, President of Chamber, and again, we're glad you're here this morning with us. At all of our events, we like to acknowledge our Washington County Business Award winners who are present with us, and we have our Business Person of the Year with us, Chris Moats with Purdue Global. Good morning, Chris. He'll make an encore appearance here shortly. In just a couple minutes, I have to make a few more announcements. Also wanted to thank After 5 Productions and Antietam Broadband. We're recording and going to be podcasting this, so if you want to see this again or see parts of it, or folks you know want to see it could be here this morning, you can see that again after today. Also wanted to acknowledge and thank Applause Catering for a great breakfast. Thank you, ladies. Quiche, blueberry pancakes, sausage, or bacon. I'm not sure how you could do anything better, so thank you. We wanted to also announce a couple of our events coming up in the next few weeks. Writing Staff Wellness Policy Seminar. Wellness in the workplace has been even more important here recently, and so we have a seminar next Tuesday, the 17th. Is that right, next Tuesday? Yes, the 17th. It'll be right back here. At 7:30, we'll have a couple labor law attorneys talk about how you can maybe write some policies and what you should be aware of and maybe not do when you do your policies, but they'll be here next week. Our Coffee Connections, we've started this back up again. It'll be April 18th at our chamber office. We'll be featuring the Barbara Ingham School students' artwork, 7:30 in the morning at our office. Coffee by Roy Rogers. We have breakfast pastries by Lighters Fine Catering, 7:30 to 9. For some networking and see some great artwork. Business After Hours, Thursday, April 19th, 5 o'clock, Middletown Valley Bank on Eastern Boulevard. The prize drawing is $27.50. That's not $27.50, it's $2,750. You have to be there to win, you have to register by noon that day, and you have to be a member of good standing. So, number one, you have great food, but you have an opportunity to win some big money. That'll be exciting. And we have Teacher of the Year coming up April 25th, Wednesday at Fountainhead Country Club, 5 o'clock. Come out and support teachers. And related to that, I've put on the table a couple copies of our On Track report card. If you are not familiar with On Track, I would encourage you to pick this up. It's a birth or cradle to college or career initiative that we're working on here. And it's tied to this morning's topic of workforce. And so if you haven't seen this, please take it with you. If you have seen it, and other folks you know haven't, please take a copy. We're trying to spread the word. So thank you for listening. Everything is at hagerstown.org if you have other questions. It's now my pleasure to reintroduce Chris Moats. He's Vice President of Partnerships and Strategy for the new Purdue Global here in town. They're our sponsor. He's going to talk to you about Purdue Global and introduce our speaker. Let's welcome Chris.
Paul, you're tall.
That's the way my parents planned it.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a privilege to be the sponsor today and to help introduce the newest university in our area, Purdue University Global. So we now are represented in the tri-state area. Yeah, if we went tri-state, I guess it would be 3 Big Ten and 1 ACC still, some great schools. Purdue's tagline is "What we make moves the world forward." And you're going to be hearing that a lot. I think it ties in perfectly with workforce development, our topic for this morning. And we like to say we do 3 things well. We help you get the right talent in the door, we help you develop the skills of your workforce, and we help you keep the talent that you want. So if you think about that, I draw your attention to the flyer on the table. It's probably our best piece on workforce development. We're working a lot right now with businesses and industries in this area to custom tailor educational solutions, workforce solutions to help build talent in the workforce. And so if you want to sit down and talk to us about some of the neat things that we've been able to do for businesses in this area, we would love to do that. We're not talking about just discounting tuition to get people into degree programs. Anybody can do that. What we're really talking about is looking at the competencies that you need in your workforce to do the jobs that you do, whether it's manufacturing or it's service or whatever it is, and quantifying that to credit competencies. Credit is kind of the coin of the realm and how higher education works, and it's what leads to degrees. What we're all about is competency-based education. What are the skills that you need? Let's quantify those. Let's cut the time it takes to complete a degree. Cutting back on that time, getting you to degree faster, obviously reduces your cost. And that's what we're all about at Purdue University Global. So it's our privilege. We've been in this community for 75 plus years, serving the workforce needs. We want to continue to do that under a brand that is really outstanding in what it does and what it has done for America's workforce. So we want to help you do that as well. So with that, it's our privilege to sponsor, and we're looking forward to the program. And with that, I want to introduce our speaker this morning. Jesse McCree is the CEO of South Central PA Works. That's a regional workforce development board whose mission is to unlock the human talent that drives the development of businesses and individuals, creating opportunity for growth and prosperity for the South Central PA region. South Central PA Works invests in, evaluates, and advances high-impact workforce development programs, training centers, and policies that drive its regional workforce and economic growth by connecting the needs of businesses and job seekers. Under Jesse's leadership, South Central PA Works invests over $14 million of public funds annually, supporting the local labor force of over 740,000 people. So with that, I'm anxious to hear from Jesse. I hope you are too. Jesse.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Morning. Chris, can I take you along with me everywhere I go to read that spiel? I can use that. Hey, good morning, everyone. Again, Jesse McCree from South Central PA Works. Drove down this morning from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It's a beautiful drive. And I just for a little bit of levity, I told my wife last night what I was coming down to talk about, and I told her it was, eggs and issues. And she's like, well, that'll be a great meeting for you. You love eggs and you've got some issues. So that was a nice little moment of encouragement there. I really want to communicate a couple key things here this morning, and I think it speaks a little bit to what Chris was talking about with Purdue Global. The number one challenge that we see in South Central Pennsylvania is very likely one of the number one challenges that you guys are seeing in Washington County and in Hagerstown metro area. And that is businesses are having an extremely difficult time finding skilled talent. They're having a difficult time recruiting for jobs that are available. They're having a difficult time developing a pipeline of talent to keep those businesses economically competitive. And this is something that for communities across our region in Pennsylvania and as well as in Maryland, getting this question right is going to be the key to continuing to see communities and economies grow. So I want to tell a little bit of a story here, but before I do that, just to give you a quick 2-minute version of what we do. As a workforce development board, we really are a convener and a conduit between job seekers and employers. We have about $14 million a year that we invest in high impact workforce development programs, and we run job centers throughout the region. And what our role really is to do is to work with businesses to build that skilled pipeline. And we are seeing that is the biggest challenge in our region. Where we serve and the region that we serve is an 8-county region in South Central Pennsylvania. It's a population of about 750,000 for the labor force. As you can see down here, where we are right there, that green star. How did I do, by the way, geographically? Did I do pretty well? Yeah, Hagerstown right there. You see that this labor shed in Hagerstown and in Washington County is directly related to the work that we're doing here. Everyone knows I-81, 68, 70. This is a crossroads here in Hagerstown. And there are a number of people, and we'll talk about this in a second, commuting from South Central Pennsylvania down here and vice versa each day. So the issues and the challenges and the solutions that we're working on in South Central Pennsylvania are, in my opinion, very relevant to the work that you all are doing here. So I told you I was going to tell a little bit of a story here. I don't like to normally start off with dour news, and I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I think in one chart, This speaks to a really interesting challenge that a lot of communities throughout the country are having. We hear a lot about the erosion of the middle class. And in one chart here, we see the fading American dream. Based on the year of birth and based on your percentage of earning more than your parents do. And you start this chart here in 1940 with about 92% chance that you will earn higher wages than your parents do. Now, as a millennial, right there in the mid-80s, I have nothing to do with that little jump up there, right, from 1980 to 85. But you see that number is basically a coin flip right now, with the percent chance that you will earn more than your parents do. This is a challenge that we see because of two really key reasons. There is increasingly high levels of income inequality in our country and increasingly low levels of socioeconomic mobility, right? So each one of those individually is not a good situation, but combined, we have high levels of inequality in income and very low levels of being able to move up the socioeconomic ladder. This is a challenge for all communities, and in doing some research and looking at some of the work that you guys have done with the On Track work, this is directly speaking to the challenges that we see here. In addition to the fact that there are some socioeconomic mobility limits and high income inequality, we're also seeing that there is a workforce composition that is drastically changing. And I'm pulling this right from that report. It's excellent data, Jim. Oh, you know, is this copyrighted?
No,
Okay, it's good.
Isabel speaking too.
Exactly.
He took it from Georgetown.
Yeah, no, it's all public there, but this is a great chart to sum up, and so you are probably familiar with this. 40 years ago, about 72% of jobs required a high school diploma or less. This is not radically new information, but now that number is half of that, less than half of that, 34%. 28% 40 years ago had jobs requiring some college or a college degree. That number is now 2/3, right? And so communities that are able to upskill, train, get credential attainment and post-secondary attainment are going to be much better positioned to be able to compete in the labor economy that is changing so quickly. Again, from Georgetown, in about 7 years or so, 66% of all jobs will require some level of post-secondary education. One of the things that I want to mention about this is that typically we've seen a push towards 4-year degrees exclusively. What I want to note here is that 4-year degrees and 2-year degrees are part of this post-secondary credential. What it also includes is the more than a high school diploma, less than a 2-year degree, work-based learning, industry-recognized credential. Think apprenticeships or other type of work-based learning. Those are the jobs that are growing, those are the jobs that will be here in 10 years, and those are the jobs that, as we'll see, pay very good wages for regions. Washington County, and this is a challenge that we see in our region as well. About 28% have a 2-year degree or more. So right there, that credential and that education attainment gap is one of the most pressing challenges for any community, this one included. I promise that this news gets better as we go on here, right? But this is just to paint the picture. The type of education needed, essentially what this shows here is you've got postgraduate degree and bachelor's degree and a 2-year certificate representing about 30% of all the jobs that are out there right now. What it doesn't show, or I should say what's important to note, is the short-term on-the-job training, moderate-term on-the-job training, and long-term on-the-job training still represent about 50 to 55% of all jobs that are out there. So it's important to note that, yes, a 4-year degree and that level of educational attainment is important, but there's also apprenticeships, work-based learning opportunities, and industry-recognized credentials that are more than a high school diploma, less than a 2-year degree. A little bit more context to this, this skills gap. What we see is we have a surplus of workers in high-skill jobs and in low-skill jobs. The issue is these middle-skill jobs. Who here has either heard or familiar with the term middle-skill jobs before? Okay, handful. Really what this is it's the more than high school diploma, less than 4-year degree. And we're seeing in Maryland about, a little bit less than 50% of all the jobs are in this category of middle skill jobs. So right here there is an opportunity for us to upskill, retrain, and put industry and education at the center of a system to say, how do we get our workers into these middle skilled jobs? They pay well and they're growing. Okay, what is this? Traffic, congestion, logistics. From where we sit in Harrisburg, the story goes, we are a day's drive within about 50% of the US population. And I think similar goes here to this region, right? Within about a day's drive, you can reach anywhere between 40 and 50% of the US population. This is an area, and this is a region that is extremely well positioned for future growth. If we get a transportation bill, if we get any sort of investment from federal, state, or local sources, we are going to see an increase in the importance of being here as a logistics and transportation hub. What it also speaks to is, will we have the workers to be able to build the roads, build the highways, continue to be in those construction jobs to actually do the work? Right now there's a significant skills gap in the construction field, and if we invest another X number of billions of dollars in rebuilding roads and highways, where are we going to find those workers? These are challenges that we need to be thinking about as a community. This is a picture that was taken in York, Pennsylvania, just up the road a little ways. And this is a collaborative robot. Who here has either worked with or heard about collaborative robots in the manufacturing space? Couple folks, right? These are robots that work right alongside the humans, right? So you program them to be able to move and to be able to move goods back and forth as sort of an automated process working alongside the worker. And this is rapidly changing the manufacturing space. Automation, robotics, all of this is now disruptive technology in industries that have been bedrocks and foundations for our economy for a long time. How do we upskill, retrain, and invest in our workers to not only be able to thrive in this space, but to also be able to grow as a region? What's the largest and fastest growing sector in South Central Pennsylvania? Is healthcare. And it's similar down here in terms of how fast this industry is growing. It's more than just the nurses, and it's more than just the frontline support workers. It's paramedics, it's EMTs, it's radiologists, it's technicians that are working in all aspects of the healthcare sector. So how do we do a good job at training a whole suite of occupations in the healthcare field? Because this sector will continue to grow in the next 10 years. And where's Bob? Right there. Hey, Bob. I talked with Bob before, and he came up with a great statistic, which I don't know if you saw my slides before, but how many baby boomers retire each day in the United States, Bob?
10,000.
10,000. 10,000. Pretty sure you saw my slides before, right? 10,000 baby boomers every single day leave the workforce. So as we start painting this picture, we see educational attainment and post-secondary credentials are going to be critical for the jobs and economies and regions moving forward. We also have rapid changes in logistics, transportation, as well as manufacturing. We also have growth in healthcare sectors, and then you add on top of that in this great big recipe of demographic shifts of epic proportions of 10,000 people leaving the workforce every single day. And don't let my gray hair fool you. I am a millennial, and but this is a rapid shift and a change in our demographics. Okay, two other questions here for some audience participation. The ratio of the number of unemployed people to job postings here in Washington County, and this is data that was as of last night around 8 o'clock. It's the ratio. What is it? 10 to 1, good guess. Ratio of number of unemployed people to job postings. There are 3,000 people officially unemployed in Washington County, and there's about 3,000 job posts right now. When you think about that, there's 1 to 1. Back in the Great Recession, when the unemployment rate was at much, much higher levels than it is now, you were thinking about 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 people for every job post that was out there. So we are seeing a tightening and a constraint in the labor market right now where businesses literally cannot find workers to fill those job posts. Some of those job posts have been on there for 6 months. I was just talking with Mike at the table here, in a company in South Central Pennsylvania. There was a staff accountant, is that what it was? And I think they put the position out last fall for about $45,000 staff account position, and it still isn't filled. Those are the levels of labor market constraint that we're seeing across the region. Okay, regional jobs, not just Washington County, not just Hagerstown, but the whole I-81 corridor within about 30-minute range of where we're standing right now. How many jobs in the healthcare sector will we need over the next 10 years? This is replacement and growth. Any guesses? Good guess. About 61,000, right? I heard, what'd you say, 70,000? Yeah. 61,749. That's including growth, that's including replacement, that's including all the shifts in the demographics over the next 10 years. And again, keeping in mind that this isn't just a Washington County specific issue, this is the counties that are surrounding to the south of us and also in our region in South Central Pennsylvania. If we've got a hospital in Franklin County that is going to hire 500 nurses tomorrow, they're going to be pulling from this labor shed here too. So we have to be thinking about these problems and the potential solutions at a regional level. So this really is the question here. That's a lot of labor market data, but it's will we have the skilled workforce to keep up not only with future growth, but also the changing industry needs and the shifting demographics that we're seeing throughout the region. Okay, that was a lot of labor market information. Hope everyone's still with me. Now for some good news, and now for some things that we're seeing as positives for the region. Low unemployment, like we talked about. In this I-81 corridor, this is not just Washington County, but also the counties in West Virginia, in Virginia, and in South Central Pennsylvania. It's also something to look at when we talk about commuting patterns. What this shows is that there's about workers in Washington County and where they live is about 7,000 people from Franklin County travel each day to Washington County. It's about 1,200 or so from Fulton and about 500 from Adams. So you combine all that, you're talking around 10,000 people every day across the border to come here to work. So the labor market challenges, the regional approaches to workforce development is something that we as two states can really do a lot of work on together because your labor shed is ours and vice versa. For regional unemployment, we're also seeing some really, really low numbers, 4.6% for Franklin, 4.1 for Berkeley, and then you start getting down here to Frederick, around 3%. This is essentially what most economists would call full employment, right? Or pretty close to it. Growth is also happening here too. We're seeing GDP changes between 3 and 4% throughout this entire region. So again, the message is that this is a really great place for regional growth, and we're really well positioned to continue to see that growth if we can get this question right about the skills gap. This is just a little bit of data about some of the regional economy and some of the sectors that help drive the growth. Here, as you see, manufacturing, healthcare and social assistance, retail trade, educational services really make up this regional economy. I want to take just a minute on this slide here because this is where we start to take the data and we start to apply it to some solutions. These are projected occupation gaps over the next 10 years for this region. And for those in the back that can't see, it's about 500 or so every year for healthcare practitioners and technical occupations. So every year there is a gap of the number of workers being produced and the number of jobs that are available. So you think about that is economic growth opportunity left on the table if we can't get people skilled and placed into these jobs. So in the top right-hand corner, we use this data to say, as a workforce development board, where can we make the best investments for education and training programs for the region? So we're looking at how do we get nurses and those sort of healthcare practitioners into the workforce to fill that skills gap. Conversely, down here, we're looking at production occupations, sales and related occupations, food prep and serving related occupations, and we're seeing a surplus in the number of people that have those jobs and the number of jobs that will be there over the next 10 years. So really what workforce development is in one slide is how do we take workers in this quadrant, those that there is a surplus of workers, and retrain them and upskill them and give them educational pathways to the jobs and the occupations that will be in demand over the next 10 years. In a perfect world, we'd be able to rebalance all of this with all that up there. That's a little bit easier said than done, but that is the challenge for communities, to be able to use this data to produce actionable solutions for helping our job seekers and our businesses. If you made a list of the top in-demand occupations in South Central Pennsylvania, you know what you'd find? It's the same occupations that are in demand here. No surprises. Healthcare, computer and mathematical occupations, business and finance, transportation and material movers, construction and extraction, manufacturing occupations. These are all in demand, or based on those demographic shifts, we're going to need significant resources to be able to backfill all the folks that will be leaving. Just as a quick side note, I spoke to a company in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. So this is in the northeast part of our region. And in one day, in this manufacturing company, they're a pretty significant operation. In one Friday afternoon last year, they had 486 years of experience walk out the door. 486. Now, they are a large corporation, but I don't care who you are. If you have 486 years of experience walk out the door, that's gonna hurt. And it wasn't unexpected. These were planned retirements. And so when that company came to me, they said, we realized that we were behind the curve on this. We were not proactive. We should have been reaching out to our community colleges, our post-secondary institutions, our career and tech centers, our workforce development boards, our United Ways, et cetera, to start to prep this years before we saw this exodus from our doors. 486 years, that's always stuck with me. And so these occupations are mirror images of each other in our region and in Washington County. So we've seen the shifting demographics, we've seen the in-demand occupations, we've seen that this region is positioned to grow. So what do you all, as leaders in this region, what do we do about this, and how do we adapt to these changes? I want to get to a few things that I think as takeaways this group can have this morning, but I want to share with you a little bit about what we're working on and what we're learning in South Central Pennsylvania, and maybe that can be helpful to this group in terms of here's what we're seeing work, and here's where the investments are for the Workforce Development Board and how successful we're seeing them. First, and I think this is really critical, it's important to create and invest in and build employer-led and employer-driven sector partnership work to help drive the right training at the right time. That is to say, if business isn't at the table, if business isn't there to help drive these decisions for community, then it's not what I would call demand-driven. It used to be years ago with workforce development that it was kind of a train and hope, right? Put them in a training program and kind of hope that they get a job. That's, to me, a backwards way of doing it, right? If you have employers saying, hey, community college, or hey, career tech center, this is what the curriculum needs to look like. These are the priorities that we as a business have. We can then take that intelligence and put that into the training programs. So creating employer-led sector partnerships is really critical. Another one is building work-based or earn and learn program models, and doing that again with private industry and with education. These earn and learn models have been proven across the board, particularly for young adults as well as for working adults, that earn and learn models are great ways to learn the skills on the job and grow along that career pathway while you're earning a wage. So instead of sinking a lot of time and money in debt and hoping that there's a job at the end, it's get trained, get the job, and let the employer and let that sector sort of drive that career pathway development for the individual. We're also considering that there's relatively low unemployment. At our job centers, we're seeing that the people walking through our doors have some significant, we call them barriers to employment. A lot of times it's limited work history, a lot of times it's low literacy levels, sometimes it's even former incarceration. So we're trying to pilot some innovative strategies to bring those that are on the sidelines, so to speak, in the labor force, and bring them back in a smart way. An example of that is for a population that we work with in Dauphin County, formerly incarcerated, and it's all men in the program that we're working with. as the day that they are released from the state correctional facility, they get placed into one of our job centers in a program, what we call sort of a transitional work program, right? So it's 4 months, highly subsidized, and they get paid every single day after their day work, right? So it's a lot of it's cleaning, maintenance, recycling center work. So it's relatively low wage, low skill, but it's day one after they get out of the facility. What we're seeing is that those are strategies for helping to reduce recidivism, right? Going back into the criminal justice system, putting them into work, putting them on a career pathway, incorporating financial literacy, those sort of strategies as a holistic approach. It's going to need that kind of investment for people that have limited opportunities, limited work history, and some barriers to employment. Those are the types of strategies that we're finding to be successful of bringing those that are not in the labor force back in. This is also something else too, and I'm not sure if it's a challenge here, but I know it is in South Central Pennsylvania. The perception of certain jobs is something that needs to be changed. And it not only needs to be changed for students, but it also needs to be changed for parents as well. So the old days of manufacturing, is dirty, dark, and dangerous. Well, manufacturing isn't that way by and large anymore. It's high tech, it's clean, there's robotics, it's STEM occupations. So we're launching this summer a Careers in 2 Years marketing campaign for our region. And that includes community colleges, career and tech centers, United Ways are going to be involved with that to say, hey, here are the jobs, here's what they pay, and here's how you get there with more than a high school diploma, less than a 2-year degree. A couple other things here. Mike Ross is here from Franklin County Area Economic Development Corporation. Mike is also on the Workforce Development Board of Trustees. And increasingly what we're seeing is that economic and workforce development need to be working in lockstep, particularly in reaching out to businesses. What we found is that businesses were getting 15 knocks on the door, right? One from the chamber, one from the EDC, Economic Development Corporation, one from Workforce Development, and one from each separate program. What we're trying to do is coalesce that into one sort of unified regional business service team. So we can say, it doesn't matter who gets the credit or even who gets the funding, it's how do we better respond to businesses in a more cohesive and unified way. I think it's a really important thing as communities think about collective impact models and think about ways that we can do this work better aligned. A couple more here. We're also seeing that for, we call them opportunity youth, but a lot of times these opportunity youth they're disconnected from education and they're disconnected from the labor force. How do we do multi-year investments with someone, a young person who may be 15 years old, and do summer work or summer work experience, an internship that sort of progresses up the ladder to have a company at the end of that 2 or 3 year investment, bring them on as an entry-level worker. We need corporate buy-in, we need private sector buy-in, as well as buy-in from our school districts to say, how do we make these investments in those youth that are potentially going to be disconnected from the labor force or from education. Again, brought up the meaningful career and education work standards. This is really important. Increasingly what we're seeing in school districts is that they're having to incorporate work-based career readiness, career exposure into their curriculum. What better opportunity than to bring this sort of conversation with workforce development and employers into the K through 12 curriculum and say, here are the jobs that are available, here's how you get there, and sort of bringing a whole new perspective to students about the potential career pathways they can take. And then finally, we're seeing that it's all about leveraging resources, it's the partnerships, and it's the work that the community does as a whole. No one organization can tackle this, and we're seeing that the more the Workforce Board tries to operate in a silo, the more we're going to be hitting our head against a brick wall. That there are so many resources and partnerships in our community, and I think that's a huge takeaway for the work that you guys have ahead here in Washington County. Couple final points here. I think it's really important as communities for us to take a look at workforce development from as early an age as we can possibly get. You could even argue that workforce development and education and building those right pathways start at before birth, right, prenatal. It's investing in early childhood learning and education. If there is one thing that we could do more of, and I don't think we could ever hit a limit of how much we invest in our young people. I think, actually, I'm looking at you, Jim, here. I think there was a number from that report that I read last night. Something like 90% of a young person's brain is developed by the time they're 5 years old. So that's a huge number, right? So all those, those investments in early childhood learning and education, we can't get enough of that. And I think that will help us prepare the workforce for the future for sure. I think it's also important for us to, as I mentioned before, do a better job at aligning and connecting the business community with education. Businesses are clamoring for skilled talent and work. They don't know how to build that pipeline, and school districts are now saying, by mandate in some cases, we are required to have more career awareness, career readiness embedded in our curriculum. Those two need to be talking and sitting at the same tables a lot more than they currently are. So the opportunities for us to align and connect that work is really, really critical. Mentioned this before, if we were to look at the groups of occupations that we talked about, it's really STEM H, STEM plus H. It's science, technology, engineering, math, and health. Those are the jobs that we don't know what the labor market's going to look like in 10 years, but if we had to wager, it's those STEM H occupations that we need to be doubling down and investing in for our community. Again, aligning post-secondary programs to industry-recognized credentials. We've had some great conversations with the state system of higher education in Pennsylvania, and what they're seeing is enrollment in higher education has started to decline. What are ways that we can take that higher education model of a four-year degree and start to compress it or condense it down so that it's a shorter-term, industry-recognized credential that has merit and value in the labor force? Certainly, there's always going to be that four-year degree track and that two-year degree track. But what are ways that we can sort of condense those credentials down to a little bit more accessible for some of our population? Again, investing in our long-term unemployed and our disconnected youth. And again, I think it's so important for us to be integrating workforce and economic development together. So those are just some of the thoughts and ideas of how we're seeing progress happen in South Central Pennsylvania, and hopefully there are some takeaways for this group here. As leaders in the Hagerstown area, as in Washington County, the encouragement would be continue to do what you're doing. I was really impressed with the on-track work that I've seen this community pull together. That collective impact model of no one organization or no one institution is going to be able to solve this problem. Business, education, the not-for-profit, philanthropy, workforce development, all of these need to be working together in a unified way and being held accountable to achieve some of these goals. So if we're going to continue to grow as a region, solving this skills gap really is key. We've got to get this question right. I think as we start talking about industry and education alignment, we can't do that too much. Let's be nimble and adaptable, right? Who knows what the labor market's going to look like in 10 years, but if we have community leaders who say, let's be thinking about 5-10 years down the road, we'll be well positioned to continue to grow. And then I just have to say, it's leaders like you that will really help make this work possible. And all politics is local, but also so is economic and community growth. So it's encouraging to see you all here excited about this topic. Hopefully there were some good takeaways there, and I'd love to take some questions and answers if anyone has any thoughts. So thanks again for the opportunity to speak.
Question for Jesse?
Yes.
One of the things that I want to point out is technology training. I've been in technology for almost 25 years, and even though I had a bachelor's degree, right now there's so many certifications that aren't available at a college level, or whether it's a 2-year or a 4-year. You can get these trainings online and it being a lot less expensive for individuals. And with technology jobs, it's higher paying. So I'm kind of surprised I didn't hear anything in aspects of requiring the technical training is a little bit different.
Yeah, it's a good point. So I think there's, for all these occupations, even in something like healthcare, the opportunity to incorporate technology, and not only to incorporate it, but to be able to use it in everyday work is going to be so critical. I think those STEM occupations embedded in that are the ability to be very nimble and adaptive to the technological changes that all workers are going to need to be able to have. I also think that the mechanisms by which people learn is also something where technology as a platform is going to be incredibly powerful. You see some of these micro-credentials. Udacity is a great sort of organization, and what they're doing is they're sort of doing these small, short-term micro-credentials that are all delivered online for very, very, very low cost. And a lot of them are in the IT, IT tech support specialists, coding, programming, cybersecurity. Those are jobs and those are skill sets that are going to be incredibly valuable in the years to come. And sort of one final note on that is, again, because we don't know what the labor market's going to look like in 10 years, you have to say, what skill sets can we give young people now that will help them navigate the on-ramps and the off-ramps as they move forward? And so one of them, so I took in high school, I took Latin for 6 years, right? Notice I said 6 years in high school, right? So I took Latin, right? And Latin was considered to be, if you can learn Latin, you can, learn anything about English and language and writing. I would say for my 3-year-old and for my 6-month-old, coding is going to be the new learn the second language, right? Now, they may not grow up to be coders, but it's going to be that thinking and that mindset and that ability to learn will be highly valuable, and they'll be able to adapt to the labor market changes, I think, better having that background. So I think it's a great point. Didn't mention it here, but I think it's embedded in a lot of what we're talking about. So,
Jesse, can you speak to the development of non-standard apprenticeships in Pennsylvania?
ooh. Yeah, this is a good one. So there is the word apprenticeships, and it's sort of the in vogue term, right? We've heard about the German model and how how Germany has sort of built their apprenticeship program, and to a large degree that's become in vogue here in the U.S. to sort of bring back apprenticeships, right? Reinvest in those apprenticeship programs. To that end, there's also been this push of non-traditional occupations for apprenticeships. And so the term apprenticeships for some companies is a little bit of a loaded term, but I think that as we moved towards non-traditional apprenticeships in areas that aren't necessarily the skilled trades, what we're seeing is that it's, calling it whatever you want to call it, it's the employer has buy-in to say, we're going to hire this person and do a long-term on-the-job training that has sort of benchmarks and standards and competencies. And so from my opinion is that you can call it an apprenticeship in non-traditional, or you could call it a long-term, earn and learn with classroom training or on-the-job training. Almost by any name, it's an effective model of getting people to get really, really deep knowledge about a skill set in industry. And I think that model is effective across all sorts of sectors, not just necessarily the skilled trades. There are millions of dollars being poured in Pennsylvania to these non-traditional apprenticeship programs. So we are seeing a groundswell of excitement and support about how do we do this apprenticeship model at this company, and we've never done it before. It's pretty exciting.
That's great, thank you.
Thanks. Other questions, Bob?
Jesse, at Manpower, we've been saying for years that the companies that get this and learn to look at the workforce differently, look at training differently, and invest in the community and so on, will be okay. The ones that don't get this yet are going to struggle. I think in general, the business community doesn't truly realize how difficult recruitment is going to be over the next 10 or 20 years, but they're coming around. That being said, you mentioned a lack of skilled workers in the construction trades for new road construction. The same can be said for electricians and plumbers and so on. We hear that all the time. You can have great training programs, but if the kids aren't interested, they die. What are your thoughts on having our younger people begin to understand that a 4-year degree in English is not gonna pay them nearly as much as, you know, getting into the electrical field or something like that.
This is the silver bullet. This is the $64,000 question, or however much that is. I forget, $1 million question. And I think it also speaks to why we believe it's important as a workforce board, not just to invest in the training, right? We have resources to help train and reskill people, but also to market and create awareness of the occupations that are there. I don't think that we will single-handedly be able to solve that ourselves, but I think as a region we say, here's an electrician, here's a plumber, here are these skilled trade occupations that have massive skill gaps and are getting paid ridiculous sums of money in some cases, right? I mean, we just had a pipe burst in our house a couple months ago, and I call up the plumber, and he's like, I can't help you, you know, I'm backed up. Like, it was the fourth plumber that I called, and the amount of money that I gave him was, might as well have just taken out a second mortgage, right? I mean, the plumbers are making good. So I think you're never going to get someone, so I was never good at working with my hands. I don't know if I would have been a good candidate to sort of, you know, get into the skilled trades. But there is that portion of young people that say, I didn't even know it was a viable opportunity, and now it's at least on my radar. And I think that's, as a community, that's our best effort to say, these are the jobs, here's the pathway, here's the wages. It's not going to be for everybody, but I think you're right. If we don't catch them, if we don't educate our young people 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade, by the time they're, you know, out of high school, out of college, it's more difficult to retrain them into those jobs. It's awareness, and we need to double down on that in, you know, middle schools and in early high schools, I think. Hey, thanks so much. I really appreciate the invite.
Thank you, Jesse. Well, a couple things. Apprenticeship, this Thursday evening, we have an apprenticeship open house at the WCPS corporate headquarters. Kelly Schultz will be there, our Secretary of Labor. So there's an opportunity to talk about apprenticeship. We have money, but not, or we have businesses looking for help workers, or we have workers looking for businesses. Which is it for both? So we're looking for businesses. We have some money to fund some of this. So if you're interested, Thursday, 4 o'clock, come on out. We also are ahead of the curve with the middle school folks. We have a career exploration day, June 6th. All 7th graders will be coming to HCC to hear about these 2 types of careers, including some of the blue collar STEM. So I'm excited. Jim and I and a couple of other folks in here were at an event at the Maryland Theater a couple weeks ago. Jeff Canada, president of Harlem Children's Zone, their goal was to get every child into college. He talked about the movie or something he did out of his book, Waiting for Superman. And what's that? Documentary, Waiting for Superman. And the executive summary is, as a kid, he believed in superheroes, and his mom told him there was no such thing as superheroes, and he started crying, not because there was no Superman, but who was going to rescue him from this life in Harlem. And what he said was, there is no Superman or Superwoman, it's us. And we are going to rescue ourselves from these issues that we're talking about today. And so I'm excited because we are ahead of the curve, I think, with On Track. We have a lot of good initiatives going on, and there's no press here, right? Mike's not here. I know we're recording this. I want to attribute this to anyone, but we've had visitors come to Washington County, and Jesse's not one of them. Jesse's one of us. We've had people come from out of the area, our elected officials, say, wow, you got a lot going on in Hagerstown, Washington County. They're surprised. And the coin term was Washington County. We're rural, not stupid. Yeah. We have a lot of great talent in this room, but it's going to take us, it's going to take the private sector to drive this forward, work with education, work with high school, work with colleges. And so I implore you to keep working on this. Again, I look around, we have a lot of great partners working on this initiative. I want to thank Jesse for being here. You can't be a prophet in your own land, so we're glad you're here. We have a lot of people saying the same thing you're saying, so we're glad you're repeating it. You're kind of like our parents. You know, you hear your parents say a lot of good things, but when a coach tells you, say, hey, that's pretty smart. So thank you for coming here, sharing your message. We appreciate it, Mike. Thank you for the connection. Want to thank Purdue University Global, Chris and Heather. Thank you for sponsoring this and the work you're doing. I know we have a lot of great partnerships. And by the way, if you're a chamber member, 10% discount at Purdue University Global. So that's an opportunity for you and your staff. And again, I want to thank all of you for being here this morning. It's an important topic. We might be missing a few people, but we have some great people in here to spread the word and work together, and I know we can solve this problem, and we have the opportunity. So thank you, and have a good rest of the day.